79-year-old Cardinal Robert Serrar, born on the 15th of June 1945, is a Guinean Catholic prelate who served as prefect of the Congregation for Divine Worship and the Discipline of the Sacraments from the 23rd of November 2014 to the 20th of February 2021. He previously served as Secretary of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples under Pope St. John Paul II and President of the Pontifical Council Cor Unum under Pope Benedict XVI. He was made a cardinal in 2010. His motto is Sufficit tibi gratia mea, which means, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." And he says that the church established by Christ is not to please everyone. The Church of Christ should not compromise truth in order to be considered woke or in tune with the times. As St. John Paul II once said, "We must defend truth at all costs, even if we are reduced to just 12 again." And I invite you to take a listen to His Eminence Cardinal Robert Serrar as he explains why the church established by Christ should not please everyone, and why the Church of Christ should not compromise truth in order to be considered in tune with the times.
The localization of the distancing from God is something each of us must examine on a regular basis. In what or who do we find meaning? As I have said elsewhere, it must be God, otherwise we are left with nothing. God or Nothing is the title of one of my books. This is true for each one of us, but also for the church herself. In the 1999 General Audience, Pope John Paul spoke about a practical atheism that can be applied to some in the church today. He said, starting with sacred scripture, we immediately note that there is no mention of theoretical atheism, while there is a concern to reject practical atheism. Rather than atheism, the Bible speaks of wickedness and idolatry. Whoever prefers a series of human products falsely considered divine, living and active to the true God is wicked and idolatrous. We see this in the church when sociology or lived experience becomes the guiding principle that shapes moral judgment. It is not an outright rejection of God, but it pushes God to the side. How often do we hear from theologians, priests, religious, and even some bishops or bishops' conferences that we need to adjust our moral theology for considerations that are only human. There is an attempt to ignore, if not reject, the traditional approach to moral theology as defined so well by Veritatis Splendor and at the catechism of Catholic Church. If we do, everything becomes conditional and subjective. Welcoming everyone means ignoring scripture, tradition, and magisterium. None of the proponents of these paradigms shift within the church, reject God outright, but they treat revelation as secondary, or at least on equal footing with experiences and modern science. This is how practical atheism works. It does not deny God, but functions as if God is not central. We see this approach not only in moral theology, but also in liturgy. Sacred traditions that have served the Church well for hundreds of years are now portrayed as dangerous. So much focus on the horizontal pushes out the vertical, as if God is an experience rather than an ontological identity. There is an implied understanding by the proponent of practical atheism that faith somehow limits the person. They take St. Irenaeus' axiom, the glory of God is man fully alive, to mean the highest end of man is to be fully himself. This is true if we understand man as a creator made for God. But the practical atheism see God and his moral order as a limiting factor. Our happiness, according to this way of thinking, is found in being who we want to be, rather than conforming ourselves to God and his order. It is all very now-oriented. What has meaning is that which speaks to the contemporary moment, divorced from our individual and corporate history. This is why the tradition of our truths can be so easily dismissed. According to the practical atheism, tradition is binding, not freeing. And yet, it is through our tradition that we more fully know ourselves. You are not isolated being and connected to our past. Our past is what shapes who we are today. Salvation history is the supreme example of this. Our faith always echoes back to our origin, from Adam and Eve, through the kingdoms of the Old Testament, to Christ as the fulfillment of the old law, to the advent of the church and the development of all that was given to us from Christ. This is who we are as a Christian people. It is all radically connected. We are a people who live within the context of what God created us to be, which has been received more deeply over the centuries, but is always connected to the revelation of Christ, who is the same yesterday and today.
So this is hoping that we have picked a thing or two from the words of Cardinal Robert Serra. Thank you immensely for watching. Talk to you soon.